How do you reconnect with your intuition? And how do you even know it's your intuition in the first place? That is today's viewer question. And it actually comes from two different viewers. One asked each question. So I want to first give you an example, and then I want to dive into the answers of the questions. So I just came back from a big conference for Psychological Association for Psychologists, and I took a bunch of my students to the conference, and we were talking about how one of my students is facing a really big decision for her, and that's where to go to graduate school. And she's gotten a couple of offers. The tuition varies widely, where they are located varies widely, and she's really struggling with how to make a decision. And I just said to her, what does your heart say? And she didn't quite know what that meant. And so as we started talking, I began to realize, and she began to realize, how disconnected she's become from herself. She's really good at listening to other people's opinions. Her friends have weighed in, her significant others weighed in, her parents have weighed in, her grandmother has weighed in. And so she's got, as she told me, a very lengthy pro and con list for each of her options. And she still doesn't know what to do. So we talked about this idea of connecting in with your intuition. And she asked me, well, how do I know it's my intuition? And I said, well, it depends, because everybody's intuition shows up a little bit different. Typically, for most of my clients and for me in my experiences, it shows up somehow as something sensory. So some of my clients have a smell, like a scent of roses. I actually have a few clients who smell roses when they know that it's their intuition. And roses are associated with the Mother Mary. I have a friend whose grandmother always had roses and wore rose scents, and so she feels like it's her grandmother leading her from from heaven. And I have a couple other clients that just are like, yeah, I often smell roses when I know I'm on the right path. Occasionally, I have that happen myself. So intuition can actually show up in a number of different ways. So it may come through the sense of smell. It may come through the sense of taste. Some of my clients, when they feel like they're not listening to their intuition, or something has happened that's not in alignment with where they want to go, they get like this bitter taste in their mouth. And that's how they know that that's not an intuitive thing at all. In fact, that would be a bad thing to do. So their intuition is coming up through a taste sensation. I have some that experience a tactile sensation. And I think probably all of us at one point or another have felt, if we were dogs, it would be like the hackles going up on our backs. Like if you're, it's late at night and the place you want to go is there's a shortcut down a dark alley and you're like kind of got the hackles up, like maybe that's not such a good idea. So it's a tactile sensation. I have others who report they feel like someone's touching them, like comforting them when they're making the right decision. So maybe it comes tactily from you. I have a number of clients who also have the auditory sense come in. So maybe they hear a voice inside their head saying, do this, and kind of out of nowhere, and it just didn't make any sense, and yet it's like, this is the right thing to do. Kind of this voice comes into play. Sometimes it's a voice of like a past loved one, or sometimes it's a voice that they haven't heard before. Sometimes it's a sound. Like I have one client who says that when she hears birds chirping, especially if it's at an off time, like at night, when the birds usually aren't active, and she hears birds chirping, that's how she knows that this is something I need to pay attention to. And if the birds are chirping, that may be a good thing, or sometimes she says it feels like more like a warning sign. So you kind of get where I'm going with this, right? Like you have to tune in to how your personal brand of intuition is going to show up. For some of my clients, it's a visual thing. They dream very vivid dreams about a situation that's happening or may happen, and their dream kind of tells them, either literally through the images or through some kind of symbology that we work together to interpret, or they consult some kind of dream interpreter, that they figure out what that dream means. And that's their intuition coming out saying, hey, you need to pay attention. So especially if you've been dreaming about the same thing or the same person over and over again, that may be your intuition going, maybe you need to reach out to that person, or maybe there's some closure that needs to happen in your life around that person. You don't necessarily need to reach out to them to do that closure, but something you need to do within yourself, like a cord cutting ceremony or a release ceremony or letting go of that person if they keep coming to you in your dreams. So intuition can show up in a variety of ways. And so what I encourage you to do, if you're not sure how your intuition shows up, is to first thing in the morning, last thing at night before you go to bed, just ask intuition, how do you want to show up for me? And then just kind of at the end of the day, do some journal reflections. Like, what happened that was kind of not normal or seemed like it might have been my intuition? And just start recording and just start noticing. Typically, once you tune in, your intuition will show up in a variety of ways. I certainly have personally experienced all 5 senses coming in through intuition. Dreams are a really common one for me. Smell is actually becoming increasingly common, and I wasn't used to having that being part of my intuition. Auditory has been a common kind of hearing this like voice, a disembodied voice out of nowhere kind of saying, you should do this in your head. And I'm like, oh, okay, that feels like that resonates. Or don't go down that dark alley. Or oh, okay, maybe I should. Or it's a physical, like that tactile sensation. So the second question came from another one of my clients that we've worked privately together some. And she said, I feel like I've reawakened my intuition. I've got that connection there. She's one of the ones who has a lot of experiences via smell. And she's like, how do I know though? How do I know that it's my intuition and not my ego when that happens? Because I oftentimes, and we do this, we experience something that we feel like is an intuitive hit, and then we second guess ourselves. And that's what I was talking with my student about over the weekend. It's like, she knows what to do, but she's got all these people in her life that are telling her what to do, and it kind of goes against what her heart is telling her to do. And so she's struggling. And so when we do, right, because other people, we may have asked for their opinion, they may have given us an unsolicited opinion, and we feel like, I don't want to please them, or maybe they're right, or what if I'm wrong? What if I fail? What if it doesn't work out? We have all these doubts. So how do I trust that that's really the voice of my intuition and not my ego mind coming in, or people pleaser, inner mean girl coming in? How do I know? So for me, and again, this is something that you can ask. You can do that kind of hand over heart. Okay, intuition, how will I know this is really you? And see what bubbles up. And that's part of the experience for me, is that when I ask a question and I just get out of my own way and I allow whatever the answer is to just bubble up, I know that that's not ego mind, because I've taken my mind out of the equation. But that's much easier said than done, and it took a lot of practice for me to do that. So when I first started reconnecting with my intuition, what I began to notice at that point in time is my intuition came most strongly in dreams. That's always been true for me my entire life, but also through physical sensations in my body. So what I began to notice is that when I ask, what should I do? And I got an answer, and I felt expansion. I felt free. I felt uplifted. I felt light. That was my intuition. If I got an answer and I felt contracted and anxious and tense and like, ugh, really? That wasn't my intuition. That was my ego mind coming into play, or my inner mean girl, or the voices of the other people in my life that thought I should be doing something a little bit differently. So for me, and again, touch in with yourself, but for me, when I know it's my intuition, no matter how it shows up, whatever sense it shows up in, because it feels right. In my body, it feels right. It feels open and light and expansive instead of restricted, contracted, I don't want to do that kind of thing. So for me, it's very much a bodily sign, and that's how I know. But again, check in with yourself, because my brand of intuition is not going to be your brand of intuition. That's the beauty of that inner goddess, that intuitive knowing, that inner guidance system. Every one of us has our own. Even if you haven't checked in with it in decades, it's still there. You just have to reconnect and reactivate. So, two-part question. Where do you start? Start the sensory exploration, asking your intuition, how do you want to show up? See what bubbles up, and then just start journaling. Take a couple weeks. Just notice. Whenever I smell roses, something good happens. Or whenever I have a dream about this, something bad happens. Or whatever it may be. Just start to notice. And then see, again, checking in. How will I know it's my intuition? And see if that body sensation thing resonates for a lot of my clients. A lot of us experience body sensations. It may not for you. You may have something else. Maybe it's a smell, maybe it's a sight, maybe it's a taste that you know it's your intuition versus your ego mind. But start to pay attention and just kind of start to record. This, I felt like this was my intuition speaking, and I felt really open and expansive, and this wonderful thing happened. Or I felt like it was my intuition speaking, but something was off about it, and I felt kind of contracted, and it ended up not being a good decision. So just no blame, no shame, no, tell your inner critic to take a back seat, and just start to notice, how does my intuition want to show up for me? And what signs do I get that point me on the right direction? Sometimes it's a physical sign. And so I've had clients, and this has certainly happened for me, that regardless of how their intuition shows up, especially if it's a visual or auditory, they'll experience something in real life that came to them in a dream. And it's like, oh, that's a match. That's it. That's how you know it was real. So, maybe you dream that, you're supposed to, you do something, and part of your dream there's a heart-shaped pillow or something, and you're going through the store and you see a heart-shaped pillow, or you see a heart-shaped rock when you're walking on a nature trail, and it's like, oh, and it reminds you of that experience. That's a ping. That's like, yep, that was your intuition. That's the universe reinforcing that for you. So start to look for signs. Start to look for signs. So one last example I'm going to share. One of my favorite, she's a business solopreneur, entrepreneur guru. Her name is Natalie McNeil. And she was talking about an experience she had once. She wrote a book called She Takes on the World, and she has a website the same name. And this is before she ever did that. She kind of knew she wanted to be an entrepreneur. She didn't want to take that corporate job that all her family and friends were pressuring her to take. And she said she was driving along, and she would like this title, She Takes on the World, kept bubbling up for her, I guess is what she could call her business. And her ego mind was like, that's kind of stupid. That's ridiculous. Like, who's going to buy that? That sounds like all narcissistic. And she's driving down the road, and she sees this huge globe, right? The world on the side of the road randomly. And so for her, it was like, okay, apparently I'm supposed to take on the world and write a book by that name and have a website by that name. So that was her intuitive hit. And, again, she was coming from a place where she wasn't very connected with her intuition at that point. So it can be anything like that. But start to just notice how your intuition shows up, and then start to notice how the universe verifies that for you. So it could be that you get what you want, or you get a symbol, an answer that you needed right when you need it. So I hope that serves you. It's Dr. Mary. Keep those questions coming in. Dr. Mary at drmarypritchard.com. And I will see you next week. Much love, and bye for now.